Hey everyone, it's Amaya
and SayItOutLoud.
And welcome back to Say It Out Loud. This is episode 7, which means it's our final episode of season 1. Honestly, that's a little strange to say. When we started this, we talked about wanting to create a place where teenagers could talk about things that we don't always know how to talk about in real life. And we've talked about a lot: stress, anxiety, burnout, friendship, social media, and self-esteem. This pressure to be okay all the time. But there's one conversation we haven't really had yet, and it's probably the hardest one.
Today we're talking about depression, hopelessness, and suicide. And before we continue, we want to say something important. If this subject is personal for you, you don't have to keep listening. You can pause this episode and you can come back later. You can skip it completely. Taking care of yourself comes before finishing a podcast episode.
And if you're listening because you're worried about someone else, we hope this conversation gives you a better understanding of what they might be going through. Because depression isn't always obvious. Sometimes it's crying, it's anger, it's sleeping all day, sometimes it's barely sleeping at all, and sometimes it's losing interest in everything. And sometimes someone is laughing with their friends at lunch while feeling completely disconnected from everything around them.
That's one of the hardest things about mental health. You can't always see it. If someone has a broken arm, nobody expects them to just pretend it doesn't hurt. But when someone is struggling emotionally, people sometimes expect them to act normal because they look normal.
And that's where I think we need to start. Depression isn't a personality trait. It isn't laziness or attention seeking, and it definitely isn't something someone chooses. It's really mental health. It's a real mental health condition that can affect the way someone thinks, feels, and behaves. And sometimes a person can't even explain why they're feeling the way they do.
Which can make it even harder, because imagine already feeling terrible and then thinking, I don't even have a good enough reason to feel this way.
Exactly. You don't need a perfect explanation for your pain before you're allowed to talk about it. You don't have to prove that you're struggling. You don't have to wait until things become unbearable. You can ask for help because something feels wrong. That's enough. Before we begin, we want to remind everyone that if you're feeling overwhelmed or thinking about hurting yourself, you do not have to go through it alone. There are people who genuinely want to help. Today isn't about having all the answers. It's about reminding you that hope still exists, even when your brain tries to convince you otherwise.
You might be wondering why all this matters, and to answer that, just hear this fact.
In the United States alone, 6,500 teens commit suicide every year. And that's more than 330,000 people aged 15 to 19, according to the World Health Organization worldwide.
Okay, we spent the entire episode talking about something really heavy. So before we go further, I want to keep our tradition and do one last little question. Amit, what's something ordinary that made you really happy this week?
A baby waved at me in the grocery store.
That's it?
No, listen, I waved back, okay? Then he kept waving and, obviously I had to keep waving back because at that point we were, committed to the conversation.
And that's really cute. Mine was seeing a German Shepherd wearing little rain boots.
Oh my god, a German Shepherd?
Yeah, and he looked completely miserable, like he was personally betrayed by the concept of rain boots.
That's so cute.
And I think that's a really good transition into what we're talking about. Because sometimes when you're depressed, it can feel like happiness has disappeared completely. But those tiny moments can still exist. A baby waving at you, a ridiculous dog, a song you forgot you loved. They're small. They don't magically fix depression, but they're real.
And I think there's a difference between saying, look at this happy little thing, so everything is fine, and saying, even while things aren't fine, little moments can still exist. Those two things aren't the same.
One thing people don't always understand about depression is how convincing it can be. It can make thoughts feel like facts, like nobody cares about me, I'm a burden, I'm never going to feel better, nothing's going to change. When you're in that mindset, those thoughts don't necessarily feel like thoughts. They can feel like reality.
And that's simply why telling someone think positively doesn't really work. If someone is struggling to see any possibility of things improving, saying just be happy doesn't give them anything to hold on to. Sometimes what they need isn't someone trying to argue them out of their feelings. They need someone to sit with them.
There's a huge difference between saying you shouldn't feel that way and saying I don't completely understand what you're feeling, but I'm here.
The second one matters because you don't need to have the perfect words. You don't need to be a therapist and you don't need to solve your friend's depression. You can just listen and ask how they're doing. Check in again tomorrow. And if you're seriously worried about them, involve a trusted adult.
And I know sometimes teenagers are scared of that part. They're afraid that telling an adult means they're betraying their friend. But keeping someone's serious struggle a secret isn't always the same thing as protecting them. If you genuinely think someone might be in danger, getting an adult involved can be one of the most caring things you can do.
Even if your friend gets angry at you for a while, their safety matters more than keeping a secret.
I also want to talk about hope, because I think we've made hope sound way too dramatic. Like it's supposed to be this huge realization where suddenly everything makes sense. But sometimes hope is much quieter than that.
Sometimes hope is just, I'll deal with that tomorrow.
Exactly. Sometimes it's getting through one difficult day. Sometimes it's telling someone, I'm not okay. Sometimes it's going to school even though you don't really want to. Sometimes it's sitting with your family, listening to music, or doing your homework. Or just sometimes deciding that you don't want to figure out your whole future tonight.
And that's something I really want people listening to understand. You don't need to know exactly how your life is going to turn out in order to keep going towards it. You're allowed to not know and to be confused. You're allowed to change your mind about what you want, and you're allowed to have a terrible week. You're allowed to need help, and none of those things mean your story has reached its ending.
And getting better doesn't always happen in a straight line. Someone can feel better for a while and then have a bad day. That doesn't mean all their progress disappeared. Healing isn't a test that you either pass or fail.
And sometimes getting better means letting other people help you. A parent, a guardian, a teacher, a counselor, a doctor, or a friend. Just someone that you trust. You don't have to carry everything by yourself just because you're used to doing it.
So let's make this really direct. If you're listening right now and you've been struggling, we're not going to tell you that everything is magically going to be perfect, because we can't promise that. Life is complicated. People disappoint us. Things change. There's going to be difficult days.
But difficult doesn't mean hopeless, and feeling hopeless doesn't mean that your future's actually hopeless. Those are different things. Sometimes your mind can tell you that there are no options left when there are options you haven't been able to see yet. That's why reaching out matters. Someone else might be able to see a possibility that you can't see right now.
So tell somebody. And if the first person doesn't understand, tell someone else. If you can't say everything out loud, start with one sentence. I've been having a really hard time lately, or I don't think I'm doing okay, or even I don't know what's wrong, but I need someone to listen. You don't need a perfect speech.
And if you're listening because you're worried about a friend, don't underestimate a simple message. Hey, I've noticed that you seemed a little different lately. Are you okay? And if they say they're fine, but you still feel like something's wrong, you can check in again. Not once, not just because you asked and they said they're fine. Actually keep checking in. Sometimes people need to be asked more than once before they're ready to talk.
For our final challenge of season 1, we're keeping it simple. Check on someone. Not because you think you can fix them, not because you suddenly have all the answers, just because you care.
And if you're the person who needs help, your challenge is to tell one person. You can text them, write them a note, ask them to sit with you, talk to a teacher after class, tell your parent, or tell your counselor. However you do it, make one person aware that you're struggling.
Because sometimes the hardest step isn't getting better. It's letting someone know that you need help getting there.
And we want things to end with something practical. If this episode brought up difficult feelings for you, please talk to someone you trust, like your parent, a teacher, or a coach.
If you're in the United States, you can call 988 to reach the Suicide and Crisis Lifeline. It's available 24 hours a day. If you believe you or someone else is in immediate danger, contact emergency services or get a trusted adult immediately. And if you're outside the United States, ask a trusted adult to help you find the appropriate crisis service where you need to live.
You don't wait until things become a crisis before asking for help. You can ask now.
Well, that's season 1.
7 episodes, that's kind of crazy.
When we started this, I don't think either of us knew exactly what this would become. We just knew that there were teenagers experiencing things that we weren't talking about enough.
And maybe we didn't solve anything, maybe we didn't have all the answers, but I hope someone listening realized they weren't the only person feeling something.
And I hope someone who was struggling decided to tell somebody, even if it was just one person.
Because that's really what Say It Out Loud was supposed to be about. Not pretending everything's okay, not pretending we're experts or having the perfect answer, just making sure that it's a little easier to say, I'm not okay, and then giving someone the chance to answer, you don't have to handle it alone.
And if you remember nothing else from this episode, remember this. You don't have to know what tomorrow looks like. You just have to let yourself reach it.
And if today is difficult, that doesn't erase every day that hasn't happened yet. There are conversations you haven't had, places you haven't seen, people you haven't met, things you haven't learned, songs you haven't heard, laughs you haven't had yet. There are ordinary Tuesday afternoons you haven't lived through yet. And sometimes it's the ordinary things that end up mattering the most.
So don't worry about having your entire life figured out. You're allowed to take it one day at a time.
And if you need help, ask. If your friend needs help, stay with them and get an adult involved. If you're having a good day, appreciate it. And if you're having a bad day, let someone know.
Mental health isn't a conversation that should end when this campaign ends. Keep talking, keep listening, keep checking in. And guys, check out our app that's linked in the description below. It helps you track your habits and your mood every single day.
Thank you for listening to #SayItOutLoud. Thank you for taking these conversations seriously, and thank you for being here for season 1.
Take care of yourselves.
And each other.
And remember,
sometimes the hardest part is just saying it out loud.